Port of Spain, from mud hut to Caribbean metropolis. Ever wondered how a small, muddy fishing village transformed into the vibrant, bustling capital of Trinidad and Tobago? Let's dive into the incredible story of Port of Spain, a city with a history as colorful as its world-famous Carnival. Our journey begins long before any European ships reached these shores. The area we now call Port of Spain was originally a fishing village named Cumicarupo, inhabited by the indigenous Arawak and Carib peoples. Imagine a quiet coastline dotted with thatched huts, where the only sounds were the waves and the calls of tropical birds. This was the tranquil beginning of a city that would soon find itself at the center of a global power struggle. Everything changed in the 16th century with the arrival of the Spanish. While they established their first capital in St. Joseph, the natural harbor of Cumocarapo was too valuable to ignore. For nearly 200 years it remained a small, somewhat neglected port. But its destiny was about to shift dramatically. The real birth of Port of Spain as we know it happened in 1757. The Spanish governor at the time, Don Pedro de la Moneda, decided that St. Joseph was too vulnerable to attacks and too far from the coast. He made a bold move. He relocated the capital to the small port town. He officially named it Puerto de España, which translates to Port of Spain. At this time, the population was tiny. Just a few hundred people. It was a humble settlement of mud-walled buildings, but its strategic location held immense potential. The late 18th century brought a wave of change that would forever alter the city's DNA, the cedula of population. In 1783 was a game-changer. This Spanish decree invited Roman Catholic settlers from friendly nations to Trinidad, offering them land grants. French planters, fleeing the turmoil of the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution, flocked to the island with their enslaved African workers. This influx dramatically increased the population and infused the city with a rich French Creole culture that you can still feel today. By the 1790s, Port of Spain was rapidly expanding. Streets were being laid out and more substantial buildings were replacing the old mud huts. But another major power shift was on the horizon. In 1797, a massive British fleet under Sir Ralph Abercrombie sailed into the Gulf of Paria. The Spanish governor, Chacon, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, surrendered without a fight. Trinidad, and its new capital Port of Spain, was now under British rule. The British continued to develop the city as a major commercial hub. The 19th century was a period of immense growth and transformation. The population swelled with immigrants from all corners of the globe, liberated Africans after the abolition of slavery, indentured laborers from India, as well as workers from China, Portugal, and Syria, Lebanon. Each group brought their own traditions, foods, and faiths, creating the incredible multicultural mosaic that defines Trinidad and Tobago. This is the era when the city's iconic landmarks started to take shape. Think about the Magnificent Seven, that stunning row of mansions around the Queen's Park, Savannah. These architectural marvels, built in the early 1900s, showcase a wild mix of styles from German Renaissance to French colonial, reflecting the diverse backgrounds of their wealthy owners. The Savannah itself, once a sugar estate, was turned into the sprawling public park we know and love today, a green lung for the city. But the city's growth wasn't without its challenges. In 1808, a devastating fire, known as the Great Fire, swept through Port of Spain, destroying most of the wooden buildings. While tragic, this event allowed for a more organized and resilient rebuilding of the city. Streets were widened, and fire codes were put in place. From the ashes rose a more modern, structured city. Let's talk about the economic heartbeat of Port of Spain. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was all about sugar and cocoa. The port was a bustling center of trade, shipping these valuable commodities to Europe and North America. The wealth generated from this trade financed the city's development, building its infrastructure and grand buildings. As we move into the 20th century, another resource boom would redefine Trinidad's economy: oil. The discovery of oil in the early 1900s brought a new wave of prosperity and modernization to Port of Spain. The city became the administrative and financial center for the burgeoning oil industry, attracting international companies and creating new jobs. This is when the city's skyline began to change, with taller, more modern buildings rising up. During World War II, Trinidad became a strategic base for the Allied forces, particularly the United States. The Americans established a naval base at Chaguaramas, just west of Port of Spain. This period, known as the American occupation, had a profound impact on the city and the country. It brought an influx of American money, culture, and influence, which you can still hear in the evolution of our music. The mid-20th century was a time of political awakening. The call for independence from British rule grew louder. Port of Spain was the epicenter of this movement. Woodford Square, right in the heart of the city, became known as the University of Woodford Square. It was here that Dr. Eric Williams, the nation's first prime minister, delivered powerful speeches, educating the public and rallying support for independence. On August 31st, 1962, the British flag, the Union Jack, was lowered for the last time, and the red, white, and black flag of Trinidad and Tobago was raised over Port of Spain. It was a moment of immense national pride, and the city celebrated like never before. Post-independence, Port of Spain continued to evolve as the capital of a new sovereign nation. It faced the challenges of nation-building, economic fluctuations, and social change. The oil boom of the 1970s brought another period of intense wealth and development. This is when we saw the construction of landmarks like the Twin Towers, which dominated the city's skyline for decades. But the subsequent oil bust in the 1980s brought economic hardship, a stark reminder of the nation's reliance on this single commodity. Today, Port of Spain is a dynamic metropolis. The population of the city proper is around 40,000, but the wider metropolitan area is home to hundreds of thousands of people who commute into the city for work and entertainment every day. It's a city of contrasts, where historic colonial buildings stand in the shadow of modern glass and steel skyscrapers. You can walk from the Red House, the seat of Parliament, to the bustling street food stalls on the Brian Lara Promenade in just a few minutes. The city is the undisputed cultural capital of the country. It's the birthplace of the steel pan, the only acoustic instrument invented in the 20th century. It's the home of calypso and soca music. And of course, it's the stage for the greatest show on earth, Trinidad and Tobago Carnival. Every year, the streets of Port of Spain explode in a riot of color, music, and energy as thousands of masqueraders parade through the city. From the quiet Arawak village of Cumucarepo to the bustling modern capital it is today. The story of Port of Spain is a story of resilience, diversity, and constant transformation. It's a city that has been shaped by indigenous peoples, Spanish conquistadors, French planters, British colonizers, and immigrants from every corner of the earth. It has survived fires, economic booms and busts, and political revolutions. Each street corner, each historic building, each festival tells a piece of this incredible story. It's a city that's constantly reinventing itself while holding on to its rich, multicultural heritage. That's the magic of Port of Spain. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through time. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of Port of Spain, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next adventure. See you in the next video.